When I look back at that night, I wish I had kept my mouth shut. It was supposed to be a celebration. His 32nd birthday, a small dinner at our favorite restaurant downtown. Ethan had spent the whole week hinting that he didn't want a big party, just something quiet. Just us, he'd said. But I thought a little surprise would make him smile. The place was cozy, warm lights flickering off wine glasses, a soft hum of jazz in the background. He looked good that night. Simple black shirt, sleeves rolled, that calm smile that always made me feel safe. He just told me about a promotion at work and I felt proud. Maybe too comfortable. Halfway through dinner, after our second glass of wine, I made the joke. He'd been telling a story about a coworker, someone who constantly flirted at the office, and I laughed and said, maybe I should flirt a little too. You know, just to even the score. It was meant to be harmless. Just teasing. But his smile faded before the laughter could settle. Why would you say that? He asked quietly. I shrugged, still smiling. It's a joke, Ethan. Relax. He didn't. He just looked at me, really looked at me, in a way that made me feel suddenly small. There was this long pause, the kind that feels heavier than any argument. The waitress came by with candles and a slice of chocolate cake, singing softly, and I tried to laugh it off. But he barely touched the dessert. On the way home, the silence between us wasn't angry. It was distant, like he'd already gone somewhere I couldn't reach. When we got back, he went straight to the bedroom, loosened his tie, and sat on the edge of the bed. I stood by the door, waiting for him to say something, to tell me I was overthinking. Instead, he said, "Do you really think that's funny? Pretending you'd cheat." The air felt colder than it should have. I told him again it was a joke, that I'd never cheat on him, that he was overreacting. He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the floor. You know what's strange? He said after a moment. I never joke about losing you. I didn't have an answer. He didn't shout, didn't accuse. He just stood, opened the closet, and started folding a few shirts into his duffel bag. Froze. Ethan, what are you doing? He didn't stop packing. You've been distant lately, Sarah. You laugh when I try to talk about the future, and now you joke about cheating. Maybe it's a joke for you, but it tells me something I can't ignore. I reached for him, but he stepped back. It's just a joke, I repeated, my voice cracking this time. You're blowing this out of proportion. He zipped the bag, looked at me one last time and said, Maybe I am. But even if it's just a joke, it tells me what's real underneath it. Then he walked out. I didn't chase him. I told myself he'd cool off, that he'd come back the next day. But the next day turned into a week, and a week into silence. His apartment key was left on the kitchen counter, beside the half-burnt candle from the night we celebrated. First I was angry. Angry that he'd ruin everything over a sentence said in jest. But the longer he stayed gone, the more that anger turned into something else. Fear, regret, and a sickening realization that maybe it wasn't just about the joke. Maybe it was about the pieces of distance I'd been ignoring for months. The messages I left went unanswered. The calls went straight to voicemail. I didn't know it then, but that single careless moment had opened a truth neither of us had been ready to face. The silence after he left became a sound of its own. Every morning, I woke up expecting to see his mug by the coffee maker or hear him humming in the shower. Instead, there was just the hollow echo of everything I'd taken for granted. I tried reaching out through mutual friends, hoping someone would tell me he was just giving himself time. They all said the same thing. Ethan was fine, working, quiet, distant. He wasn't angry. He was simply done. It's strange how guilt settles in. At first, I told myself he'd overreacted, that no relationship could end over a single sentence. But guilt has a way of peeling back layers you didn't know existed. The truth was that joke had come from somewhere. Some part of me that had grown careless, maybe even resentful. I had started seeing his stability as routine. His consistency as something I could mock lightly without consequence. And he had seen through it. 2 weeks later I finally went to his apartment. His car was outside, lights on. My heart raced as I knocked. When he opened the door, he looked calm, rested, but not like the man I remembered. Sarah! he said softly, as if saying my name was a test. I just wanted to talk, I said. Please. He stepped aside and let me in. The apartment was spotless, everything in order. No pictures of us on the shelf anymore. I sat on the couch, twisting my fingers. Ethan, I'm sorry. I know it was a stupid thing to say. I wasn't thinking. He nodded, but his expression didn't change. I know you didn't mean it literally, he said. But you meant it emotionally. What does that even mean? I asked, my voice trembling. It means, he said, taking a breath. You said it because somewhere you wanted to hurt me a little. You wanted to see if I'd flinch. That's what people do when they've stopped feeling safe in love. They test if the other person still cares. I looked down. He was right, and the truth stung more than I expected. I was trying to be funny, I whispered. He gave a small smile. You were trying to be distant. There's a difference. We sat in silence for a while. The ticking clock on his wall felt louder with every second. Finally, I said, Can we fix this? He shook his head slowly. I don't think so, Sarah. You don't break trust only by cheating. You break it by making a mockery of love. I realized that night how much effort I put into protecting us, and how lightly you treated what we had. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, he said gently. But sometimes not meaning to doesn't make it any less painful. He stood, walked to the door and waited. I knew it was time to go. Before leaving, I turned to him. Do you ever think about us? Every day, he replied. But I also think about peace. And for the first time in a long time, I have that. I nodded, unable to speak. When I stepped outside, the air was cold, sharp against my skin. It felt like the world was reminding me that words carry weight, even the ones spoken in laughter. Weeks passed, and I learned to stop checking my phone every hour. Friends told me to move on, that it wasn't worth the regret. But regret has its own timeline. It lingers, waiting for you to understand what it came to teach. On his next birthday, I sent no message, no call. I just lit a candle on my kitchen table, whispered a quiet, happy birthday, and hoped he was somewhere smiling again, maybe even laughing, just not at a joke that cost him everything. Because the truth I finally understood was simple. Love doesn't end with betrayal or lies alone. Sometimes it ends with a careless laugh, a thoughtless joke, and the silence that follows when someone decides they deserve to be taken seriously.